It was somewhere in the woody country on the western side of the Great Dividing Range that Joey first saw the light of day. But his earliest memories were of a little reed-edged creek. He was almost 12 months old before his mother would allow him to remain out of her pouch for long. One balmy spring day, she allowed him his longest freedom. When he attempted to stray beyond her sight, the old grey mother hopped after him and gently turned him back. Early in the summer, they left the little creek. At the end of the week, they were many miles away, making for the open plains. Three weeks later, they had reached a small waterhole in the midst of a clearing, and his mother, thirsty after her long journey under the hot sun, pricked up her ears eagerly. Satisfied that all was well, and giving Joey a warning glance to impress upon him that he must not stir from the shelter of the scrub, she hopped silently to the edge of the water. Back in the bushes, Joey disobediently hopped back the way they'd come. At the edge of another clearing, he got a big surprise. Sitting round a fire were 4 blackfellows. A 5th one came through the bushes, followed by a wild-looking half-tamed dingo, which was running round with its nose to the ground. It had scented Joey. Just as Joey decided to return to his mother, the dog saw him and gave tongue. The blackfellows dashed at Joey with loud shouts. Thoroughly scared, the little kangaroo fled through the bushes. It was the fastest he'd ever moved in his short life. Hopping madly through the scrub, he hurled himself to the side of his mother. Louder shouts came from the pursuers when they saw the old kangaroo, which stood a proud and fiercely defiant figure reared up to her full height. The dog made an immediate rush at her, but a sharp blow from the flying front paw knocked it head over heels. The dog, with foaming jaws and snapping fangs, gathered itself for another leap and flew straight at her throat. Once again, the strong paw sent him flying backward. The terrified little kangaroo tried to wedge himself between his mother's legs and was flicked aside by her big tail. The cur sprang again, and this time reburied his fangs into the old mother's furry chest. A spasm of pain shot through the gentle creature and roused her to great anger. Raising herself on her huge tail and using each leg, armed with that single razor-sharp claw, she ripped the maddened brute from throat to tail and hurled him from her. The 5 blacks redoubled their yells, then hurled their spears as one. 3 found their marks in that furry chest. With a shuddering cry, she slipped sideways and sank to the ground. Joey, knocked sideways by his mother's tail, had fallen into a dense patch of bracken where he lay hidden. Silently and fearfully, he hopped away, not pausing until he'd put several miles between himself and the sea. Terrified that he could not find his mother, he felt very lonely indeed. It was the first time he'd ever been alone at night. He was afraid, and he was lost. Joey hopped along until he came to a fern patch into which he sank exhausted. His tired little ears drooped, and he sank into a fitful slumber. Next day, the terrors of the night behind him, Joey slowly made his way along the stream toward the distant hills. In a vague way, he sensed that his mother had intended to cross those hills, and for weeks Joey penetrated deeper into the mountains. In the early autumn, he reached the true summit of the mountain range and gazed far out on the vast plain beneath him. This was the great plain to which his mother had been traveling. As he rounded a rock, he saw a large pool of water, around which about 30 kangaroos were drinking and grazing. Hesitantly, he hopped towards them, and for the first time in his life, Joey had the company of his kind. He had found, if not his people exactly, at least his kind. They were red kangaroos, the denizens of the plains, while Joey was a grey, a forest dweller. the first chilly blasts of winter found the red kangaroos and Jerry many miles southward. One day, while the mob was scattered, over the southern horizon a party of men appeared on horseback, accompanied by a pack of howling dogs. Jerry's sensitive nostrils picked up the hated scent. Man. Led by the old man kangaroo, the kangaroos swept away, stringing out as they fled. Some of the men opened fire with their guns. Joey swung away from the mob. Close behind him rode a relentless white man. How Joey hopped. Every second he expected to hear the terrifying sound of another shot, but it did not come. The long chase began to tell on Joey, but he kept going. Suddenly the man spurted forward, and in a few moments was riding neck and neck with the flying kangaroo. The man leaned forward in his saddle and dealt Joey a stunning blow on the head with the butt of his heavy stock whip. Joey came to his senses in strange surroundings. He was in a cage, a prisoner of the hated white men. His captor was taking him to his homestead further to the south, where he knew his small daughter Betty would enjoy having Joey as a pet. The warm spring days came round and found Joey reconciled to his captivity. He had learned to eat out of the man's hand. He was growing fast. He even submitted to a piece of ribbon being tied round his neck by Betty. However, deep down, there was a smouldering distrust of the whole human race. Occasionally, a strange human being would visit the homestead. One of these was always a young fellow who arrived on horseback, accompanied by a dog and cracking a whip. And one day, Jerry heard this young man arguing with Mr. Jamison, his owner.
It can't be done, Jack. Joey belongs to Betty. She wouldn't part with him for all the rice in China. Why don't you go out in the plains and catch one yourself?
Yeah, there's small chance these days of catching a young roo. I've been north, south, east and west, and the plains are deserted because of the drives lately. I can't afford to go too far. Anyway, that roo of yours is a half-grown grey. You won't find many of them about, not on this side of the range. Now, look here, Mr. Jamison. I'll give you a couple of pounds for him.
Nothing doing, Jack. I'm sorry, but Betty would never forgive me.
Funny, isn't it, that you found him among that mob of reds? Driven out of the bush by an old man roo, I suppose.
I couldn't say. Must have been something extra special, because greys always stick to the bush.
Oh, they get around all over the place.
Yeah.
Anyhow, will you sell him to me? This is the last time I'll ask.
No, I won't. How many more times must I tell you?
Is that your final word?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Jamison, keep him. I hope the thing dies on your hands.
Say, don't let's quarrel over the animal. We've been friends too long for that.
No, I'll see you some more.
Late that night, as Joey was walking around his enclosure in search of young grass, he became aware of a prowling human being. A dog began to bark. The man whistled softly. The growl died away. Swiftly, the young man unlatched the gate of Joey's yard and threw it wide open. Joey was free. By the time the sun was above the horizon, Joey was miles away, heading instinctively north towards the bush, the ranges, and the open plains. Nature had intended Joey to inhabit the open forest, not the rocks and thickets which were the haunts of his black-faced cousins, or the wide open plains which were the heritage of his red relations. But Joey was a great grey. A longing for the open forest drew him away from the hills at last. Here he could stretch his legs and indulge in those long bounds which were his birthright. Joey was different now from the terrified creature he'd been when his mother died. As one year gave way to another, he grew and grew, and his loneliness grew with him. No longer did he fear man, although there were more men about now. Stories had come through of a lone kangaroo that haunted the northern ranges. By all accounts, he was a remarkable marsupial and sudden death to dogs. A party of prospectors determined to devote part of their trip to searching out this mysterious grey phantom. One night, they sat around their campfire discussing the rumors.
Do you think there's much chance of us running into that big kangaroo around these parts, Ben?
I shouldn't think so. Bill Pike tells me he was last sighted a month ago on the hills far to the north of here. Chances are that by now he'll be well out on the plains until the winter sets in properly.
I can't say I can swallow all these yarns I hear about that kangaroo. I know that a cornered roo is sudden death to a dog, but I can't believe that any kangaroo would go out deliberately looking for dogs to kill.
Oh, hardly that, Tom. The yarn is that no dog that's ever pitted himself against this kangaroo has lived. He's taken on dogs of almost every breed, but the result's the same. I know plenty about roos, but I've never yet come across one that lived for nothing but dog killing. Oh, you could believe it of some wild animals, but not a kangaroo.
Bill Pike told me that yarn, too. He had a black retriever. They ran into this kangaroo, and it immediately set upon the dog and killed it.
Oh, I don't swallow that yarn. Most unlike a kangaroo.
I've seen two roos have a set to, but I've never seen one tackle a dog.
Yeah, I've seen a few. They fight in different ways. In the case of a dog, a roo will strike it with its heavy tail, but mostly it depends on that terrible nail on the end of the fourth toe on the hind leg. The roo stands against a tree or anything handy, leans back on this, and supports itself with its tail. It always moves its hind legs together. It can't lean on one and use the other in its fighting. Of course, in open country, the roo will stand up in the open and just use its tail for support. But when there's a brawl between two kangaroos, they stand face to face and tear each other to bits, if they can.
Next day, one of the dogs was missing. Old Ben Onslow found him lying on the ground in a pitiful heap. It was his favourite dog, Peter. He picked up the animal and carried it back to the camp. The old men persuaded the men to cease work and to go with him kangaroo hunting. They found little difficulty in locating Joey's track. A break in the bush gave him away. As he was crossing this wide open space, he was sighted by the men behind. It was a golden opportunity for them. With two greyhounds rushing him from either side, and with shouting white men all round him, Joey was in the greatest predicament of his adventurous life. He swung round to face the peril from his right, and then became urgently aware of the one on his left. Reared up to his full height, and with the light of battle flaring in his eyes, he met the attack of the first dog by swerving sharply. The animal shot past him. The second one he cleared with a hop, and then made straight for the men. Wildly, one of them fired, but the bullet sped harmlessly by. The kangaroo, with one mighty leap, cleared both their heads with feet to spare, and was gone into the bush beyond.
Good heavens! Did you see him, Ben?
Yes, he passed over my head like a great grey cloud. I thought he was going to attack us. Oh, what a magnificent creature. Oh, seems a pity to hunt him, doesn't it?
Well, you got your dog, Peter, though.
Yes, but I won't hold it against him. I, for one, won't hunt him again.
One day, Joey came home. How many years before was it that he'd played along the banks of the little stream by his mother's side? For if Joey had any real home, it was this pretty little winding creek to which he'd returned. He moved upstream and arrived at a clearing in which several other kangaroos were feeding. Joey began to graze, and presently, to his surprise, he felt something soft nuzzling him. He looked up inquiringly. It was a beautiful dove-coloured female kangaroo, and she obviously wanted to be friendly. Joey nuzzled, and she nuzzled him again. Joey was at last among his kind. For the first time since he left his mother's side, he had known kindness, and it filled him with new life. The other groups gathered round. Joey and his new friend kept close together. Truly, it had been a case of love at first sight. The old king and his beautiful subject. Joey was content. The king of the ranges had at last found his true king.